Today for Devotions with Daniella, we are reading from the first book of Daniella, Uncultured. We are in Afghanistan doing some combat patrols. This is Chapter 23, Combat Barbie. Kandahar Province, Afghanistan, 2011. I kept walking that dark day I came down from the tower. After the mission that took the lives of so many of our guys, we wondered if missions with women would be put to an end. But the pace only increased. We spent time doing roadblocks and searches of the Bedouins in the surrounding areas, stopping vehicles of suspected smugglers, and visiting villages to hang out with the local leaders and their women and children, hoping to win over the hearts and minds. A lot of our time was occupied patrolling all around the area surrounding Kandahar airfield, outside the wire. All deliberate combat operations would now have women attached to them, the generals had decreed. Overhead, the noise from the giant army helicopters was deafening, their rotors spinning in unison as they lifted off from the concrete landing pad. After the birds were gone, the absolute silence was worse, leaving me and 25 male colleagues alone outside an Afghan village. As the dust from the rotor wash settled, we all got up from our kneeling at the ready position, and I looked around, on the alert, squinting against the harsh glare of the desert sun. I saw the village about 500 yards in front of us. A single narrow path, the choke point, would make us targets if bad guys were around, as we crossed from the open desert into the center of the small town. Sergeant John McGregor, promoted in his role after the rescue missions that tragic day 3 months prior, pointed out that the rains from the night before had caved in part of the path. We needed to be on our guard. The guys got this, I told myself. They know what they're doing. We assumed our practice patrol position and began to march forward. Our intelligence briefs told us there wasn't supposed to be much danger, but nobody on this team took anything for granted. I eyed First Lieutenant Andy Wang, the new platoon leader who'd been brought in to replace John, and felt grateful he didn't look nervous. I settled my face, careful not to show any emotion in front of the guys. I clicked into being Combat Barbie. A slur some male soldiers hurled at us women who dared to play their game. But we leaned in and decided to claim the term with pride. Combat Barbie was perfect, professional, and proudly serving. So what if she was pretty too? We moved ahead, slow and steady. Out in the open country of Afghanistan, it took us nearly 4 times as long to cover ground as it did during training drills, because we never knew which part of the road would be rigged with bombs, or which rocks might hide snipers. That's asymmetrical warfare, and what fighting terrorists is like. If it were a chess game, the Americans would be just moves away from a checkmate, when the insurgents doused the board in gasoline and lighted a blaze. Winning, but not by any rules the rest of us have agreed to play by. It's hard to replicate scenarios in training because the fear, the almost buzzing alertness of being out on their sand, is impossible to mimic. I didn't think my constant fear could be heightened any more than it already was. But with each step toward the village, my heart tightened, and I battled my mind whispering a barrage of unhelpful questions. Would this be my last day on Earth? Or maybe the day I lost a limb, or 3? From near the back of the patrol, I could see First Lieutenant Wang up front, put his arm in the air, a hard, closed fist. That was our symbol, to stop dead in our tracks. It was 2 minutes. It was too dangerous to move. We'd barely been on the ground for a couple minutes, but already something was wrong. The explosive device technician near me carried a radio to communicate with his partner up front. I heard the warning crackle. We're picking up something, but we'll need some time to verify. Move slowly. Everybody be on their guard. Fear gripped me, and I could feel my body threatening to flare into fight or flight mode. But my training kicked in, and I forced my rational brain to take control. The guys with the right machines, the ones that detect bombs, were up front and on alert. I reminded myself that I was mostly safe, that what I was feeling was a physiological response to fear, one that kept me aware and alert when helpful, but could turn to panic if I let it. I would not let it. This was just an Afghan village after all, one we'd been to before. Nothing to worry about. But something was wrong. I could feel it niggling on the tip of my consciousness, and my brain spun hard as I tried to puzzle it out. War is like chess, except with real consequences. As I was the only woman on the team, John and then his replacements always encouraged me to speak up and speak out. But I needed something more to go on than my spidey sense tingling. Then it hit me. Where were all the children? Usually they were swarming out of the village, racing toward the helicopters as fast as their little feet could carry them. Where were the 6-year-old girls toting baby siblings on their hips as I'd done so often as a child? Where were the boys with their slingshots made from sticks, always scaling nearby rocks and cliffs, as nimble as the mountain goats they ran around with? Where were the children with the bright reddish-purple hair that I had thought was dyed, until I learned that it is a phenomenon found only in the deserts of Afghanistan, some DNA leftover of Genghis Khan, or so the legend goes. In the back of my mind, I scrambled to connect the dots. I was an intelligence officer, even though I was playing infantry at the moment. I knew the answer was somewhere in my brain, but I couldn't think of it. Suddenly, like the flash of a bomb, there it was. "Stop," I said, with a certainty I didn't know I had. Doubt crept in. What if I wasn't supposed to be doing anything, noticing anything, saying anything? What if no one wanted to hear my thoughts? I was just there to engage with the women and children, the ones blatantly absent. I shifted my weight and stared ahead at the endless miles of sand, steeling myself for the criticism and ridicule as everyone looked my way. I knew I'd never live it down if I was wrong. "There are no children," I told First Lieutenant Wang, "anywhere." I gesticulated around, stared at the raised eyebrow on the lieutenant, trying to read his expression. I hoped he didn't think I was trying to step on his authority, but then both of his eyes widened. "Everyone hit the ground," he yelled. That was the moment I knew for sure I wasn't wrong. The men hadn't seen it, at least not all of it. The experienced group of airborne ranger-qualified pathfinders and explosive device experts, men who did this day and night without rest, men who had been primed, who had already noticed several other indicators that could have been nothing, or could have been an ambush waiting to take 10 more of us to early graves. The children were the last piece of the puzzle, an obvious sign once combined with everything else, and one I always briefed troops about in my day job. It had only ever been in theory before, but now the reality of their complete and utter absence hit me with fear that left my hands and feet tingling. The Afghan village, it would take 20 minutes for the explosive device technician to verify the bomb in a spot they'd identified about 100 yards in front of our group. It looked pretty small, but still deadly. We wouldn't continue on the mission. Clearly, drinking tea with these village leaders would have to wait. We'd call in the suspected IED grid marker, and base operations would send a team over to deal with it more officially. By later that afternoon, the children would probably be back outside. We'd never find out if it had been a terrorist who had booby-trapped the village, or if one of the men we had tea with the last time we were here had been paid to lay the bomb. Maybe it was someone who'd had his children's lives threatened if he didn't cooperate. The Afghan villagers may have been ambivalent about the American soldiers in their country. They may have wavered between supporting us or helping clothe and feed the terrorists who tried to take our lives, depending on whose mission they related to more. But one fact didn't change. They loved their children as much as any other parents in the world. They'd know if something was wrong. They won't let their children out to play. I'd briefed this to teams of soldiers going out beyond the wire. We called them indicators, signs of danger. And I realized I'd noticed this indicator because I was a woman. On the birds taking us back to relative safety, all I could think of were the people who said to me, "Daniella, I'm so glad you weren't there," the day John died. But what if I had been there? What if any of us had been there? The women our country so strongly believed needed to be kept out of harm's way. What if, as John had once pointed out, our being different with such divergent life experiences and all the silly little things we notice was the entire point? What if we could save lives just by being women? What if I could have saved him? You can get signed copies of Uncultured attached here or listen to me read it to you anywhere you get your audiobooks.